Aren't you eating? I asked casually, and John looked down as if he were panicking. This place isn't exactly kid-friendly, after all. Everything Ken ordered seemed to be the kind of thing adults would enjoy. You must be hungry, huh? Let's grab something to eat on the way home. John nodded slightly at my words. During the checkout, the waitress chuckled as she looked at John. Not doing it today, huh? You usually do. This? She repeated a motion with her hand, flipping it from paper to rock several times. When I turned to look at John, he was trembling, holding his head. What's wrong, John? You look pale, are you okay? I was startled into silence. Hey, Anna! He looked up at me fearfully, and as I hugged him, I quickly grabbed our things and stood up. Let's go, John. And with that, we hurried out of the place. My name is Anna Turner, and I'm a 33-year-old working at an advertising agency. It's been 11 years since I graduated from college and joined this company. I've gotten used to the work over the years, and I've started to find it fulfilling. Though the job is busy, my income has increased accordingly. I think I'm doing better than others my age. Being in a male-dominated environment, I sometimes feel unwelcome. When someone says, if you keep working like this, you'll never find a husband, it irks me. It's none of their business. I've never been particularly keen on getting married. I've always thought if it happens, it happens. That's when I met Ken. Ken, a client liaison, is also 33, just like me. Being the same age, we hit it off right away. Every time I visited the client, Ken would greet me with a smile. He might come off a bit flashy, but he's friendly and great at livening up meetings, making them enjoyable. Of course, we talked about work, but even after meetings, our conversations never ended. Before I knew it, we were exchanging messages privately and began to dine out together regularly, just the two of us. Things moved quickly from there. Ken started making his interest clear. Initially, I only thought of him as a colleague, so I was confused at first and evaded his advances. But upon reflection, it wasn't a bad idea. Having worked together, I knew Ken was competent at his job, and I think his income was about the same as mine. He was clean-cut, and not bad-looking either. Most importantly, I felt really comfortable around him. I didn't hesitate much before deciding to date him. I was actually looking forward to it. If he hadn't said anything, I might have been the one to ask him out. Our relationship progressed smoothly, and 6 months later, he proposed, and we decided to get married. But then, an incredible problem arose. You're kidding, right? Come on, don't make such a scary face. One day after work, when I went to meet Ken, he was standing there with a boy who looked about elementary school age. A much younger friend? No, perhaps a relative's child. Had they run into each other by chance? Thinking it was someone related to Ken made me nervous. Feeling a bit intimidated, I approached Ken, and upon noticing me, he smiled sheepishly and said, "Meet my son, John, 10 years old. Nice to meet you." Huh? Son? The boy named John awkwardly avoids my gaze. I, on the other hand, ended up staring at him as if trying to uncover some truth. Wait. I don't understand. Son? What do you mean? Ken laughed nervously as he grabbed my shoulder. I brushed his hand away. No dodging the question. What? Were you married before? Ken looked at me with a puzzled expression. Huh? Did I not mention it? I'm a divorced dad. I had no idea. I couldn't help raising my voice. I was on the verge of a meltdown, but seeing John's face, I managed to hold it together. I couldn't lose it in front of a child. I'm going home. I'll contact you later. I was far from calm. I barely get the words out. After all, how could anyone stay calm upon suddenly being told by their fiancé, "I'm a divorced dad," and then bring the child to a date without any warning? What was he thinking? As I turned to leave, Ken hastily grabbed my arm. Hey! It took a lot for me to bring John here, and you're just gonna leave? That's not fair. Think about how John and I feel. Huh? Then think about how I feel. You could have at least told me before bringing him along. I might have been shocked, but it would have been easier to accept than being surprised like this. I didn't even know he was divorced. I needed some time to prepare mentally. What if I told you beforehand and you decided to break up with me just because I'm divorced with a son? That would be unbearable. Ken glanced at John, then started stroking his head. Looking every bit the father. Look. John is such a good kid. I was confident that once you met him, you'd feel a maternal instinct too. Huh? He said it proudly, but that's not the point. He was making a lot of assumptions. I wanted to just walk away, but when my eyes accidentally met John's, I stopped. He looked nervous and quickly looked away, but his face still had an innocent look to it. John isn't to blame, but if I walked away and he felt responsible for that, what then? 10 years old. An age where he can understand things to some extent. I wouldn't want him to think he's a burden to his father's marriage. In the end, the three of us ended up having dinner together at a restaurant. Indeed, just as Ken said, John was a very good kid. In fact, he was so well behaved it felt almost unnatural. He would eat quietly during. Ken would talk to him, and he'd respond, but he wouldn't initiate conversation. Is it normal for a 10-year-old to be this calm? It was his first time meeting his father's partner. It wouldn't have been strange if he harbored negative feelings towards me. But I couldn't sense any emotions from John at all. It was as if he had given up on everything. Having met him, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Later, when I met with Ken alone, I asked him, "Hey, has John always been like this? Mature for his age, or should I say quiet?" "John?" Ken seemed pleased that I was interested in John. "Oh. You're curious, huh? Yeah, I mean, he's gonna be our son if we get married, right?" Despite feeling betrayed by him keeping his divorced single dad status a secret, I couldn't bring myself to break up with this carefree man. His demeanor was comforting. I had never met someone as easygoing as Ken. "So? What about it? Was he nervous around me?" "Nah, that's just how John is. He used to be a bit louder, I guess. Mireille used to scold him a lot." Mireille, his ex-wife's name, perhaps? Come to think of it, I still know nothing about Ken's previous marriage. He is so open. I wonder if it's okay to ask. "Hey, you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but what was your ex-wife like?" I asked carefully, and Ken didn't hesitate to tell me. "She's 2 years older than me. Just looking at her, she's pretty. Really beautiful, but man, her personality is tough. No matter how much I earned, it was never enough for her." Huh. If he's praising her looks that much, she must be quite a beauty. As someone who's not very confident in my appearance, it kinda bothers me. Maybe sensing my unease, Ken hugged me from behind. "Don't worry. You're my best partner." "Yeah. I just can't dislike him. He always knows what to say. Besides, having a divorce and a child isn't like he cheated or anything. It just never came up before. Maybe him telling me before we got married actually shows he's sincere." I convinced myself to believe that. After that, I met with John several times. He was just as quiet as the first time we met. Getting married means considering important matters. I hoped he would get used to me, but what if his quietness was because he disliked me? Thinking it over didn't help, so when we were alone, I took the plunge and asked him, "If you're against it, we don't have to get married. What do you think?" I wondered if it was right to ask a 10-year-old, but I didn't want to marry without knowing his true feelings. John hesitantly answered, making my heart race. "I don't mind. I'm just shy." That's a relief. And a few weeks later, we got married. Not exactly a honeymoon phase, but the start of a new family life. I was anxious. Sure, Ken is one thing, but what about John? Is he okay with me? To him, I'm practically a stranger, a stepmom. I hope we can get along, but even I haven't fully grasped suddenly having a 10-year-old son. John, at 10, must be even more anxious. I hope to alleviate any anxiety and get along well. That's what I was thinking. But contrary to my thoughts, problems came from an unexpected direction. "You're kidding, again?" I muttered to myself in response to a message from Ken on my smartphone. Maybe Ken is the type who doesn't take care once he's got it. After we got married, Ken's behavior changed drastically. Overtime and drinking parties became the norm. Without any guilt, he'd even come home in the morning. If this were a boyfriend, well, even then, I'd be a bit unhappy, but now that I'm his wife, it's unbearably frustrating. Ken practically just comes home to sleep. John and I, still not fully accustomed to each other, were left alone without choice. Even if it were just me, but with growing John around, I couldn't skimp on meals. Even mealtimes became a source of stress. "How was school today?" It was normal. The conversation just doesn't flow. I feel bad for John, but I just can't think of topics to discuss with a 10-year-old. About a month into this routine, I finally lost my patience and confronted Ken. "Enough is enough. You're out drinking every single day. It's ridiculous." "Huh? It's not like I enjoy drinking. There's this thing called socializing in the world. You're in sales, you should understand. It's not just about drinking parties. There are days when work just doesn't end." If that's the case, I'm also swamped with work. Since we got married, I've been rushing home early because I worry about John, even when it means I can't work overtime. I've been starting early in the morning or using my lunch breaks to catch up. Lately, my lunch breaks have been all about working with one hand while eating sandwich with the other. "You used to have time to go on dates with me before we got married. It's not even the busy season now, so what's keeping you so busy? Come on, answer me." Ken fell silent for a moment, looking slightly annoyed, then let out a small sigh and smiled. "My bad. I guess I've been taking you for granted. Let's go out for a meal, the three of us, this weekend as an apology. And I'll try to adjust my work schedule from now on." "Really? You promise?" It's been a while since we've eaten out. I wonder where he'll take us. I can't help but feel excited, even though I know it's a bit silly of me. Ken took us to what looked like a very expensive high-end restaurant. Just the exterior of the place was overwhelming. It felt like the kind of place where important people might have meetings. "Hey, this looks expensive. Are you sure?" I whispered, not having any idea how much it might cost. Ken then covered his mouth, chuckling softly. "Stop it, you're embarrassing. You're making it obvious we're not rich. We stand out. To you, this might seem like a dream place. But I'm used to it." I could feel my face heating up with embarrassment. He didn't have to say it in such a demeaning way. Thinking back, the places Ken and I went to before getting married were all reasonably priced. Even the place where he proposed was an Italian chain restaurant. So I was just worried that he was stretching himself too thin by bringing us here. And yet, he says he's used to it. Who has he been coming here with? I've never been brought here before. All right. I muttered an apology, following a waitress and Ken. "Right this way." The smiling waitress led us to a private room, as was to be expected. "This and include the usual." Ken ordered with ease, as if he'd done it many times before. It looked like a place that could be used for entertaining clients, so maybe he's been here for work a few times. It would be a waste to sulk after being brought here, especially to such a high-end place that I might not get to visit again. I've got to enjoy it. Indeed, every dish that came out was delicious. "Eat up, so you have no regrets." Ken was in a good mood, drinking his alcohol. He glanced at me and ostentatiously lifted his glass. "If only you could drink too." Indeed, it's a shame. I've tried alcohol a few times after turning 21, but it seems I just don't have the constitution for it. It's not that I can't drink, I just don't enjoy it. Plus, alcoholic beverages are generally expensive. If I'm going to spend the same amount of money, I'd rather have juice or water. Since realizing this, I've stopped drinking alcohol, both privately and at work. Watching Ken now, I do feel a bit envious of how well he seems to enjoy his drinks, but I'm sure I wouldn't find it as tasty even if I tried the same. Just a sip? The expensive stuff is good. I'll pass. Missing out on this, you're really losing out on life. His drunken banter is irritating. Wasn't today supposed to be an apology? To blow off the bad feelings, I gulped down my ginger ale when a concerned voice came from beside me. Are you okay? John was looking at me with furrowed brows. Maybe my irritation showed on my face. It's embarrassing to have worried about him. I'm fine, really. Thank you. I waved my hands dismissively and then realized something. John hadn't touched his food at all. Aren't you eating? I asked casually, and John looked down as if panicked. This place certainly isn't kid-friendly. Everything Ken ordered was more suited to adult tastes. If only they had French fries or burger, something that appeals to everyone, but of course, there was none to be found. You must be hungry, huh? Let's grab something to eat on the way home. John nodded slightly at my words. I felt relieved to get a response. Looking at Ken, he had just finished the last of his drink in his glass. With all the food on the table eaten, it was about time to head home, so as not to keep John waiting. Ken, that was delicious. Thank you. When I hinted at leaving, Ken seemed to get the message and placed his empty glass on the table. Then, shall we head home? Yeah. As we stood up to leave, Ken suddenly exclaimed, "Oh. What's wrong?" I saw someone I know at the entrance. I'll just go say hi, so please settle the bill with this. Got it. As I called the waitress over and paid the bill with the wallet Ken handed me, she chuckled at John. Not doing it today, huh? You usually do. This? The waitress gestured with her palm towards us, flipping it between rock and paper. Was it a goodbye gesture? John isn't close with me, has such a cute interaction with the waitress. It's a bit frustrating. After taking the payment, the waitress said, "Please wait a moment," and left the room. So, John, you've been here a few times, huh? As I turned back to John, he was trembling, holding his head. What's wrong, John? You look pale, are you okay? I caught myself mid-sentence. What the waitress did earlier wasn't a goodbye gesture. Hey, Anna! As John looked up at me fearfully, I quickly grabbed our things and stood up. Let's go, John. We hurried out of the room, intending to leave before Ken returned. However, as we approached the exit, I spotted Ken near the entrance. This way, he'd notice us while we were collecting our jackets. We have no choice. We gave up on our jackets and ran through the courtyard, over the fence, and escaped from the restaurant. After walking for a while, we managed to catch a taxi and dashed into a nearby hotel. Throughout the escape, John was silent. I bought some water and handed it to John. As we sat down and he drank water, the stiffness in John's face finally seemed to relax a bit. Are you okay now? Feeling better? Yes. That's when I brought up something I had been curious about. That thing the waitress did earlier, it was a hand signal, right? John slowly nodded. From an open hand to bending the thumb and then covering it to make a fist. At first glance, it just looks like changing from an open hand to a fist, but in reality, this gesture means please help me. So, it meant that John, when coming to the restaurant with Ken, for some reason, relied not on his father Ken but on a stranger, the waitress. This suggests that maybe Ken was causing John some kind of harm. That's why I decided to flee the restaurant with him at that moment. Could it be that Ken did something to you? No. I wasn't harmed by anyone. Then who? After squeezing his eyes shut and taking a deep breath, John slowly started to explain. The truth is, the story John told me was far beyond anything I had imagined. To think that Ken could be that kind of person. I'm sorry. My dad caused trouble, even though you're so kind. The sight of a 10-year-old apologizing on behalf of his father was heartbreakingly sad. At the same time, I felt a surge of anger towards Ken. Either way, we can't let this go on. John and I began to plan what to do next. During our conversation, Ken called several times. We still have more to talk about, but it looks like we should head home soon. After paying the fee, we left the hotel without staying. What were you guys doing? I wanted to introduce you to my friends. When we got back home, Ken complained. Sorry. I got a stomach ache and ended up staying in the park's restroom near the restaurant. There are restrooms in the restaurant too. Well, it's embarrassing in such a fancy place. Fine. Whatever. He mumbled, but it seemed like I managed to deceive him. Then, I started preparing for the coming days. About a week later, with my preparations complete, I made a suggestion to Ken. I feel like drinking after a long time. Oh. Cool. Let's go. John was going to stay at a friend's house that day, so Ken and I planned to go out for drinks. It's rare for you to drink. You usually don't. I usually don't feel like it, but I suddenly wanted to. This is the first time I'm drinking with you, Anna. Ken was excited and kept drinking one after another. He also kept urging me to drink at the same pace. Are you sure you can handle all this? Don't worry. If Anna passes out, I'll take care of you. And if you pass out, Ken, I'll take care of you. We continued to drink, teasing each other. A few hours later, we were at home. Lying on the bed, Ken, who had been snoring loudly, slowly opened his eyes and exclaimed. What? Where am I? Good morning. I greeted Ken with a smile as he woke up surprised. This is our house. Our home? But you were drinking with me and… Yes, and then you passed out first. Ken muttered something under his breath. Clearly not satisfied. Did I walk to the bed myself? No. I just happened to ask a friend of yours who was passing by to help bring you home. Ken's face tightened slightly. Is that so? Good timing then. I owe them one. I'll have to thank them. Oh, you know who your friend is without me even mentioning a name? Ken looked as if he wished he hadn't said that. Clearly flustered. No, well, I can guess who it might be since I often go out drinking with them. I see. For a moment there I thought. Thought what? Don't beat around the bush, just spit it out. By now, Ken's lips were quivering, and he had gone pale. The confidence he had the night before was gone. He knew his plan had failed. And now, he was wondering how much I knew. Unfortunately for him, the answer is everything. I know everything. Everything? He is easy to understand. His voice cracked. I exhaled through my nose and stated firmly. That you're a serial marriage scammer. What are you talking about? Ken's face went from pale to white, forcing a dry laugh. Marriage scam? What do you mean? We're legitimately married. We're a real family, right? Yes, we're married. Technically. But this marriage is just another one of your divorce plan schemes, isn't it? Before we got married, I was shocked to learn that Ken had been divorced and had a child. But an even more astonishing truth awaited me. It turned out that Ken wasn't just divorced once, but 4 times. Divorced 4 times. Ah, but rather, it's impressive that you managed to get married 4 times. Must have been to people like me who are easy to deceive. Wait, hold on. What are you talking about? Oh, don't know? Drank so much you lost your memory, perhaps? I laughed mockingly, and Ken shouted that. That's it. You can't drink, right? Why am I the one who passed out first? I get it, you used some sneaky trick. Cheater. Liar. Ken glared at me. I glared right back. Unlike you, I haven't used any underhanded tactics, nor have I lied. But you can't drink. That's where he's mistaken. I've never once said I can't drink. It's not that I can't drink. I choose not to. Ken frowned and tilted his head. That's just an excuse, right? Pretending to be strong despite being weak to alcohol. Weak to alcohol? Who? What? I pulled out a can of beer from the fridge, popped it open, and downed it in one go. It's the opposite. I'm too strong for alcohol. It's like juice to me. I can't get drunk no matter how much I drink. Ken's mouth fell open in shock. Too bad. That's why your plan with your friends failed miserably. Ugh. Ken's eyes darted around. I told you, I know everything. His methods were insidiously terrible. The pattern was clear. Marry a woman who earns a decent amount and is supposedly weak to alcohol. Then create some pretext to take her to a fancy restaurant. That place, it's a familiar high-end restaurant you've visited multiple times, right? The waitress mentioned it. You always bring a colleague who loves to drink, asking for dishes and desserts to include alcohol. At that time, the waitress thought I was just one of Ken's colleagues, not his wife. And you specifically requested that the cooking methods not allow too much alcohol to evaporate. Why? No, it's just that, I was trying to let her know how good the drink is, Ken started to fumble with his words, making excuses. Even now, he's trying to wriggle his way out of the situation. No, that's not it. You wanted your intoxicated wife to cheat in her drunken state, right? It was a despicable scheme to get friends to hit on his drunk wife, creating the illusion of infidelity. That night, after we drank for a while, one of Ken's friends happened to pass by. Surprised to find Ken out cold, not me. After confronting Ken's friend, it turned out there was no actual infidelity. But compromising photos were taken, and with the woman's memory hazy from drinking. Everyone struggles to outright deny it. You use the fake infidelity and guilt you created to pressure your past wives into divorcing, all of whom paid up just as you asked. How vile. Ken glared at me spitefully but then smirked unexpectedly. But this time it's different, right? Nothing actually happened. As if he was claiming innocence because of that. I can't allow that to happen. That's right, this time you just got too drunk. Ken's lips curled slightly at my words. See? All right. I'll change my ways. I've realized you're the only one for me. There's Mireille. Huh? I repeated her name so Ken could hear clearly. Mireille. Your ex-wife, who still has a close relationship with you, your partner in marriage fraud. Why would you? Don't make me say it again, all right? I told you, I know everything. John had told me. Mom and Dad, they seem to meet every day. They don't have a bad relationship. Then why? I don't know, but they both said it was for money. The reason for their divorce remains unclear. Being a single parent does come with more support, but would someone divorce just for that? I wonder how much trouble John went through because of it. Even a 10-year-old child understood that his father was up to no good. That's why he sought help through hand signals from the waitress. But the waitress, unaware of its meaning, couldn't grasp what John was going through, making my heart ache. So, this time I'll be the one who is asking from you. Huh? Why? After all the marriage fraud and cheating with your ex-wife, you think you can get away with it? Ken bit his lower lip in frustration. Ugh. Yes, and I'll be informing the police about your past wives too. I'm sure once they know the truth, none of them will ever forgive you. No way! Ken collapsed on the spot like an octopus. If only he really were an octopus. I'd have loved to slice him up and scatter him across the sea. Ken readily agreed to the divorce after that. Moreover, it turns out he might have a child with Mireille. She's been pressing him for a remarriage. But, is it really my child? He wondered, but I couldn't care less. If he doubted it, he shouldn't have engaged in such acts. It's just more evidence of his infidelity for me. The alimony was paid in a lump sum. Luckily, it was Ken's bonus month, which was a relief. Ken had hoped for installments, but that would mean staying connected. No way I'd want that. I blocked his number. Rumor has it Ken's currently in a tight spot. After being sued by his ex-wives, one of them stormed into his office to expose everything. It forced him to resign and left him unemployed. Ken sold everything of value and ended up moving into Mireille's place to scrape by. Initially, Mireille, who had been pushing for remarriage, refused after seeing Ken's current state and now fights with him daily, demanding he leave as soon as possible. It's strange, considering how close they seemed while engaging in wrongdoing together for years. Hearing these rumors, I decided it was time for a job change. The thought of being targeted for revenge by them, now at their lowest, was no joke. Luckily, I had been invited to join another company, which I gratefully accepted. The salary wasn't much different, but the earlier finishing time was a bonus. Especially since I wasn't just looking out for myself anymore. Yes, after the divorce, I decided to take in John. The reason was simple. He begged me to. I want to live a life I can be proud of. That's probably impossible if I stay with my mom and dad. We have no blood relation and are still cautious around each other. More like roommates than a family. Yet, he started to smile more. And talks about his school life. Just hearing him share makes me incredibly happy, a curious aspect of motherhood.